Is WB ruining entertainment everywhere? We're going to talk about it in this week's episode of Gaming Insight. Let's go. Hello and welcome to Gaming Insight with me, Steve Saylor, the weekly podcast where I and a special guest talk about the biggest gaming news of the week for about 30-ish minutes. Today's special guest is content creator and co-host for Gamertag Radios and Kind of Funny XCast, Parris Lilly. Parris, it is good to see you again, sir.
Yeah, it is always good to see you, my friend. Thank you for inviting me on. Looking forward to this.
You kind of were like actually the way back. I think it was like around the pandemic. It was kind of like our conversation that we had around the pandemic and everything affecting with the game delays was kind of the progenitor of what this podcast became.
Wow.
So thank you for helping with the sort of test to drive that concept.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So before we get into the actual story for this week, I want to let folks know that if you like this show and want to support me, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Saylor, where paid members get this podcast a day early and also a daily morning podcast with me, where I talk about the daily gaming and accessibility news and so much more. All right, Parris, let's talk about it. So this week, we kind of saw a little bit more of the corporate overlords of WB deciding to inflict a little bit into the gaming space and talking about, I'm not biased at all, and talking a little bit about that they're looking into doubling down on mobile free-to-play games and live service games, and they kind of use sort of the disappointing sales of Suicide Squad to kind of and then comparing it to Hogwarts Legacy last year to kind of justify the doubling down of going into things that gamers are not necessarily a big fan of, even those who are kind of have at least a little bit of logical sense. And I wanted to hear, what are your thoughts about this news?
All right, so there's two ways to look at this, actually. If you take it on surface level, it looks like a complete disaster. What are you doing? You just put out a live service game that clearly underperformed, and you had a single player game that was the highest, I don't know if it was the highest grossing or the most copies sold game of 2023 in Harry Potter. But then you're going to double down on the one that failed? That doesn't make a lot of sense. I think this is a case where you got to look at the audience that they were speaking to. They were speaking to a bunch of investors, and you want to use buzzwords and things that are going to get them excited, to obviously reinvest in your company and what you're doing. The reality of it, just my personal opinion, I don't know anything, but my reality, I think that's happening is they will continue to make games like Harry Potter that sold very well, like Wonder Woman, as an example, is under development currently. So I do think we'll still see single player AAA experiences like that. But I do think it is probably smart business for them to also look at the Harry Potter IP. And is that something that we can monetize on a mobile scale? Is that something we can introduce into live service and generate more revenue? So I think end of the day, it's kind of a mix of both. But when you look at it on the surface of what they were saying, it's like, this makes no sense at all. What are you doing? I will just simply say, as I end this, I just think overall the industry is trying to look at what's going to continue to grow, what's going to continue to generate revenue for us. Clearly, mobile is where growth still seems to be happening. I do think live service games will continue to have a place, but you got to be smart about it. I think like Helldivers 2, as an example, shows something that if you do it right, it can work. But you can't just make a live service game just to make a live service game, which is ultimately why Suicide Squad did not succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with at least two of the three things that WB wanted to work on. I mean, of course, mobile. I mean, some people like to be able to dismiss mobile as a proper gaming market, but in reality, it actually dwarfs console gaming and PC gaming by a huge amount. So for them wanting to be able to jump into the mobile side of things, I 100% understand that, and even the free to play model, that's definitely a page in the mobile market, because a lot of games are generally, you download for free and you can microtransactions, and you can be able to spend more money, and anything got to keep you within the game is something that is worth it. And if they could be able to tap into their IPs like Harry Potter or DC or even the Nickelodeon sort of franchise. I sort of think of like Multiverses kind of starting back up again. I could definitely see them looking at it, like, and actually being successful in those kind of projects. The thing for me was with a kind of like I actually kind of went on a rant on another podcast this week about this, but it was more it was the live service aspect, because only a few weeks ago, and actually not even, I think it was like probably like last week or 2 weeks ago, they were talking about the disappointing sales of Suicide Squad, and they were comparing it to Hogwarts Legacy, which, like you said, it was the most selling, high selling game of 2023. Which, to be able to beat Call of Duty in that year, like the first time a game is able to do that in years. Like when you're comparing it to that, of course, it's not going to be great sales numbers, but the thing that kind of made me think that live service in regards to WB is concerned is how quickly they were dismissive of Suicide Squad sales numbers, and makes me think that live service is their priority to start with when developing a game, but not as something that can be integrated as part of the game, because they were like, you could tell that it was short-term sales numbers, because it had only been out for less than a month, and they were already ready to throw Suicide Squad under the bus. And that's what their goal was. So if their next live service game doesn't work, they're going to or doesn't sell well within the first month or two, then to them, the WB is going to see that as a failure. And then that's basically like, it's just kicking the studio while they're down and throwing them under the bus. I mean, we're both huge Destiny fans here. We think like Destiny is like probably the most successful live service game that we've had in a very long time, and people are trying to shoot for that success. But I think the reason why that succeeded was because Bungie was like, okay, we got a 10-year plan. We're sticking with this, even when the game didn't launch to critical acclaim. They're like, we're sticking with this, and it took 3 expansions for it to start doing well, and then it started to kind of pick up more and more, to the point where now we're at this sort of behemoth that is Destiny.
So I'm actually glad you brought up Destiny, because I think if Destiny were to happen in 2024 instead of 20, Destiny probably goes away in that first year. Yeah. Very similar to what we're seeing right now with Suicide Squad and some of these other live service games, because I don't think the industry as it stands right now, just the business of gaming, I don't think Activision, now it's Xbox, but you get my point. Activision at the time, I don't think they would have been able to absorb the low reception that Destiny had in its first year. Bungie would not have been given the 12 calendar months to make the Taken King, to try and revive it. Yeah. And this is the problem. Like, okay, Suicide Squad in its current iteration didn't work. And remember, they had already delayed Suicide Squad. It was supposed to actually come out a year ago. And then here it does come out in this state, and it still wasn't good enough. You know, you're pivoting and you're moving on. And like we're saying, we're seeing exploding budgets on the AAA level with games. Again, if a live service game clearly does not have the engagement it needs to monetize itself, you're going to pack your bags and you're going to move on. I mean, you know, we look at WB again, like you said, kind of prioritizing live service stuff over what made a lot of these franchises successful on the single player scale. Look at Gotham Knights. That's another one. Whereas, why is this a live service game? Why is there a battle pass on this? This is not why people are showing up to play this type of game. And I think the same goes with Suicide Squad. You're introducing the Suicide Squad. You have the Justice League in this game, and you're trying to make it this open world, repetitive shooter that ultimately was very bland, versus utilizing what made the Arkham series great in the first place. So I think that's why it fails. That's where I try to look at it as, I don't think live service games are bad. Like you brought up Destiny. Obviously, Fortnite is the king of kings when it comes to all of this. Yeah. The Division even is another one that I really like playing. But you're building on the strengths of what that game can do to have that carrot on the stick to keep you coming back. Just because you have an IP that people like, if it's not doing something that rewards the player to want to come back and keep playing it, if it's not honoring what made that IP great in the first place, you're just simply not going to play it. And that's the balance that we're seeing. I mean, smartly, PlayStation and Naughty Dog canceled The Last of Us Factions. If The Last of Us Factions was not going to live up to what made The Last of Us great, and you were simply just plopping a live service game into that universe to try and monetize it over and over, it's going to fail. This is why I bring up Helldivers again. Helldivers is great because it's fun as hell to play. You want to play it. It's Starship Troopers, the game. That's what you want. It's utilizing something that keeps engagement, keeps people wanting to come back to play it. Now, will that hold up 6 months, 12 months, 5 years from now? Because that's the key to these live service games. I don't know. I'll give you another example. Sea of Thieves. Sea of Thieves, if Sea of Thieves launched now the way it did back in 2017, I think it was, done. It would have failed. But it had enough time to mature and get to a place now where you got that, like the Pirates of the Caribbean thing, Monkey Island. You have all these fun things, the multiplayer stuff that you can do. And they've created this world that you want to engage with and you want to come back to. And that's the thing with live service now. First and foremost, content is king. You have to continually have new content. I can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and expect me to give you money and want to keep playing it. This is why Halo Infinite had a problem, in its first couple of years of life. Got to have the content. It's got to be engaging. It's got to be fun. And I can't feel like when you do monetize it, I'm being nickel and dime for everything. You want me to willingly hand over my wallet to you. Like, I'm happily buying these things versus, oh man, I got to buy. You're going to at some point stop doing that because there's other games and other experiences out there that you want to do. So I know I'm long-winded. You got me on.
No, I'm the same way. I'm totally long-winded too. Yeah.
But that's how I see live service right now. I do think there's a place in the industry for it. I do because again, like my daughter loves Fortnite. She loves Roblox. So there's a market there if you do it correctly. But you can't just do it just for the sake of doing it, thinking it's going to be this magical revenue generator, because clearly that's not the case. Whereas maybe 10 years ago, you could have gotten away with something like that.
Sure. And I think you're like, yeah, you said it like right, because I think if Destiny or Sea of Thieves was made in 2020, the climate is different now than it was when they were first created. So seeing these and comparing, Suicide Squad to Destiny is not exactly the best comparison, but it is like kind of what we currently have. But you're right, like being able to make it today is a lot different than it was 10 years ago. So there definitely is that aspect. But I think when you talk about like Sea of Thieves or even just Helldivers, you can let's actually use Helldivers as an example because that's the one that everyone's talking about right now and playing, is that you can tell that the gameplay loop was there. Like the fact that it's like a squad-based shooter, it has the vibe of Starship Troopers, and it's co-op, and you're going in, you're basically either taking out bugs or you're taking out robots, and basically all hell breaks loose. And you can do that and like on its own, and it's just it could be just a standard multiplayer game. Like it'd just be like a fun little, okay, we got a bunch of different maps, you can jump in here and there, and that'll be it. But what they were able to do is take that gameplay and then elevate it with the live service. The fact that they've got a game master that is constantly changing and moving stuff around based on sort of how the players are playing together, and how every squad is helping to be able to either bring down the automatons or the bugs in whatever section they're in. And that's when live service can really enhance and be fully immersive in the game itself. Two can definitely can work together, and that's when a live service game can be able to be successful. But when you come at it, at least in regards to WB sort of stance, if they're like, oh, we got Harry Potter, and wouldn't it be cool to be able to walk around and live in the sort of the Harry Potter world, and then but also make it a live service game. It's like when you're making the decision of the live service game before you even think about, okay, what is the game, then you're kind of already on the wrong foot to begin with. And when it comes to Suicide Squad, who knows when the sort of the live service aspect was talked about during its development, whether it was at the beginning or near the end. I don't know, and only Rocksteady knows about that. But I think that it was just kind of we're already kind of see the idea of live service games being kind of pushed out, only because we don't have that much screen time anymore as we used to.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I like when we see that, like we see Fortnite kind of being successful. It was able to be successful throughout this entire run of live service games, and everyone wants to chase that Fortnite high or Destiny high or Sea of Thieves high, whatever. And then even now Helldivers. I think it's when you're chasing that and you're not really thinking about, okay, what is it about the game that actually like makes sense and makes it an actual game that people want to play. That's when you're starting to kind of like you're disrespecting the player in that sense.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Completely agree on that. Another game to think of, like if it were to happen now, no way. Final Fantasy 14 online. I mean, think about the struggles, the redemption, that arc that game had to go through to get to where it is now. And again, the example of that's a game people are willingly going into and engaging with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis and happily handing over their money to keep playing it. So like, I think you put it best in that it's like, if the idea of what you're trying to make makes sense as a live service game, then you make a live service game. Don't, well, we're doing a live service game. All right, what can we throw into it? That I think you're just setting yourself up for failure every time.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about like I guess the future of live service. We're going to talk about live service as it is now and what it was, 10 years ago. But one of the things that the WBD digital executive, I forget his name, but I think it was like JB something. He basically said that was the live service plan, or at least was going to be looking into 2025, 26, and 27. And basically, without mincing, like they could have, could be live service as part of that plan, but it is kind of as a whole with regards to including in mobile and free to play games as well. And obviously we've seen PlayStation seem to be like you said, with Last of Us Factions kind of being canceled, and other live service games that they were working on. And they had 12 initially, and now I think they're down to 6 that they've sort of talked about, with sort of the companies like PlayStation sort of cutting back on live service. Do you see a future where live service is still something that we're going to be playing in like 2027, or do you think it's going to be only the select few that can survive up until that point, like a Destiny or a Fortnite or a Roblox?
I do think it'll be a select few in the sense that I feel like you're going to see more companies try it, but it's like you said, you're fighting for screen time, you're fighting for my engagement, and it's a hard thing to do. Helldivers came out of nowhere is doing it. Pal World seems to be able to do it. Like we said, Fortnite just seems to be because it's constantly reiterating itself. It's constantly doing new things. One that we don't even really talk about, but technically it's a live service game, is Minecraft. That's another one that obviously is pulling people in doing it. So do I think live service is going to go away? No, absolutely not. I think we will continue to see live service games, but it won't. It's not going to explode into there's 20, 30 live service games that people are constantly playing because there's only so much screen time. I do think it'll be that select few that will continue to get that engagement and continue to get that revenue. But we're going to see people try for sure. Like PlayStation's going to have Concord that's coming out, I think this year, maybe. I'm not sure. That's going to be another one that's entering to market. How is that going to do? Bungie's eventually going to come out with Marathon. How is that going to do? Does Destiny continue? I don't know what it'll be beyond the final shape. Like you said, we're going to see other challengers enter the arena and see how they do. But it really just comes down to what is engaging for me, what is fun, and what I think is worth my time and my money. Because ultimately, that's what it's about. If we're not buying these battle passes or season passes or whatever they're going to be calling them, then the game's ultimately going to fail, because that's how they're going to generate revenue and keep the lights on.
Yeah. And I was trying to think about, like, especially now that we're kind of like this year, it seems to be, we're talking about, like, I guess a lot of the future of the industry, and it seems to be a little bit volatile right now, obviously with the layoffs that are happening, and then studios kind of being shut down or projects being canceled, and depleting sales numbers for things, and then again fighting for screen time. Maybe this kind of maybe more of a very broad or esoteric kind of question, but where do you see the industry kind of moving forward to try to be able to at least be profitable, but profitable in the sense of, like, we're able to keep studios and keep the retention of developers? Because I think about like Japanese studios, like Nintendo studios, like a lot of the Mario team that are making Mario games have been around for Mario since the very beginning. And it's that retention of being able to, like, you have that seasoned veterans that are making these characters and making these games. And that's why every single Mario game is a hit every single time, or at least for them about 90%, 95% of the time. But like, where do you see, like, this is again a very broad question, but where do you see this industry kind of being profitable, but also be respectful of the people who are making the games too?
How much time we got here?
Well, we can solve it in about 10 minutes. How about that?
Like you said, broad question. It is something that has been on my mind, the past few weeks. with everything that's been going on. Obviously, the layoffs first and foremost, but seeing the shift in business strategy across the industry, it's like, what is it going to take to keep gaming profitable and revenue growing and all that? And I say that because I'm listening to what the leaders in the industry are telling us. Let's just go back to the Xbox business update. Phil Spencer directly told you the industry has stagnated as far as growth goes, at least on a console level. We have to continue to grow because that's just the way business works. What avenues can we explore to continue to grow? And the telling thing that he said to me, and this kind of ties into the live service stuff, we could monetize the current pool of players even more, or what can we do to bring in more players basically into the market? So that tells me we could just nickel and dime the same 200 million people that are playing these games now, or let's try and get it up to 300 million or 400 million or whatever the case may be and keep the monetization the same. But now we're growing. To answer your question, I'm actually going to bring Nintendo into this because I think Nintendo might have cracked the code, so to speak. But they're unique in that I've always said, first and foremost, Nintendo is the greatest game developer in the world. They always have been, probably always will be. They also have the luxury of they've been around for 40 plus years at this point, and they have beloved IPs. That they've cultivated over those 40 years. So when you do hear the name Mario, Donkey Kong, Metroid, Pikachu, Kirby, on down the line, those instantly your eyebrows are going to go, oh my God, they got a new game. I got to go play it, because they have, for the most part, delivered those games at quality. So you know you're getting a quality experience for the money that you're spending. Now, here's the thing that I think Nintendo cracked the code on. They don't compete on the power narrative with their hardware. They always sell their hardware at a profit. And they never, like I said, they never try and compete on the power narrative. So they're always a quote unquote few generations behind when it comes to that. The Switch, as an example, probably is not as powerful as a PlayStation 4. It's probably on par with the 360 and the PS3 from a power narrative. Maybe a little more, but you get my point. And because of that, the budgets to make their games are probably half of what we're seeing for these other AAA games that we're seeing out there. I think Spider-Man 2 is 300 million or something like that. Guarantee you the Breath of the Wild didn't approach anything near that. And the Breath of the Wild was one of the best games, or Tears of the Kingdom actually is an even better example, more recent. Tears of the Kingdom was probably the best game of 2023. Your mileage may vary. But the point I'm making on that is their budgets are cheaper. Their hardware costs less to make. Their hardware is profitable. And because they have these IPs in tow that people have recognition with, and are going to go out there and buy. Think about it. Next Mario Kart comes out, everybody's buying it.
Yep.
They have an unprecedented attach rate to their hardware. So that's the thing that Xbox and PlayStation struggle with. Like, sure, they got these great exclusive IPs, all this stuff, but then, we know this thing, unfortunately, due to a lot of the leaks and things that have been happening, and FTC and all that. But you finding out, okay, great. Spider-Man, Returnal was great. Ratchet and Clank were great. Nobody was buying them. And that's crazy. But look how much they cost to make. So it's about that return on investment of that. So I know I'm long-winded to kind of answer your question, but I wanted to point that out, is that as we look ahead to the future, I call it short-term pain for long-term success. And trust me when I tell you, all the people that they're getting laid out, that's where my focus immediately goes, because you want those people taken care of. You don't want to see layout. We're going to lose a lot of senior level experience in gaming because of these recent layoffs, because why would I go take another job in gaming? They're going to go do something. They're going to take their skill set and go somewhere else where they have a little more security. That's the unfortunate short-term thing that I think we're going to see out of that. So I want to first and foremost be clear on that. My sympathy and all that goes towards the people that are currently being laid off, because it is leadership decisions, especially during COVID, when they were seeing a lot of growth, that spurred on overhiring, budgets exploding, all of that. And now we're seeing the repercussions of that. So now the wallets are tightening, people are getting laid off, projects are being canceled. So again, in the short term, we're going to see there's going to be a lot of less risk taken in the short term.
Yeah.
But even once we get through the short-term pain and we get to the future and beyond, what I think is going to happen is you're going to see smaller budgets. You're still going to get AAA games, but I think you're going to see a scaling back of some of the budgets on these AAA games. You're going to see smaller teams making them. You're going to see more AA experiences, which I don't think is a bad thing. So gaming itself is going to be fine. I think these over budget, and I'll use this as an example. Take Immortals of Avian. Came out last year. Big AAA game, brand new IP that came out. It didn't work. That studio, I think the studio is still open, but they had massive layoffs. They had to scale back. You want to see these risks at the AAA level, but when they don't work, this is the repercussions because of the big budgets. Suicide Squad that we were just talking about. I'm literally waiting on the tweet from Jason Schreier to tell me that there were massive layoffs at Rocksteady because I think it's going to happen. Unfortunately, Rocksteady, legendary developer, made some of the greatest gaming experiences I've ever had. But this is what happens. If your AAA game doesn't land in the current landscape, if it doesn't work, this is what happens. You're going to see the scale back. So I do think short term, we're going to see a lot of scale back. But long term, I think the industry will be okay. I think it will, quote unquote, right itself and move forward and we'll be fine. But anybody expecting to see a bunch of new IPs in the short term, a lot of risk being taken at the AAA level, I don't think you're going to see it. I think people are going to play it safe for now, probably until we get to the next generation. Things that are obviously already in the pipeline are going to happen. But as far as new experiences, your mileage is really going to vary on that. But I think once we get to the next generation, whatever the PS6 is going to be, whatever the next Xbox is going to be, sure, you're going to get a few big AAA experiences, but I do think you're going to see some smaller games being made that can take risks because they have smaller budgets attached to them, and the people making these games are more protected as a result. So I hope all that makes sense.
No,
but that's what's been floating in my head.
No, 100%. And I loved your Nintendo example too, because they are definitely a company that knows their IP in and out. They are very protective of their IP, not just in regards to a copyright protection sense, but just in quality sense. And they, and you're right, like with Tears of the Kingdom coming out last year, like a game that basically triples the size and the scope of its previous game on the same hardware, where people were already ready to say, oh no, we need a Switch 2 now because Nintendo can't make these games that work on the hardware anymore. And that's definitely not, like, they basically were like, bet, hold my beer. And I think that, yeah, it's in a sense, like they're very much like kind of like they are definitely the biggest or the best sort of game developers out there. And then when you talk about sort of like I think the short term, long term, I think, yeah, Nintendo's going to be in their own world because they've kind of always been. And I think that's probably the best spot for them. Honestly, they don't need to compete with Xbox or PlayStation, and they've showed that they don't have to. And yeah, you're right. They could able to make hardware. Like, they just boggles my mind that with the first year of the Switch, I mean, there wasn't a huge amount of units out there as there is now, but you're talking like a 60-70% adoption rate of all of their games that they came out with, and that's like unheard of even on a PlayStation or an Xbox on a launch year. So I definitely think that, yeah, Nintendo is definitely I think they're going to see I think with the Switch 2, whatever that's going to be, I think it's going to just be an iterative console that is going to, but still going to be able to handle all the IPs. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just along the lines of the Switch kind of goes to the point that we're talking about. I mean, and rumors, but we're assuming this is what's happening. You know, they're delaying the Switch 2 until March of 2025. And part of there's two reasons for that. They want to make sure they have enough in the supply chain to meet demand, which again, because they know it's going to sell, and they want to give the launch lineup teams, more specifically that 3D Mario, because I'm there day one, but that 3D Mario and the other launch lineup games more time and development so that when they do come out at launch, guess what? They're quality. And if you want to buy a Switch 2, there's one available for you to buy, which again, further invests you into Nintendo's ecosystem, further invests you to know I can trust buying that game from this developer because it's Nintendo and I trust this IP and I have for the past 40 years. So you're going to get the Mario Karts, the Metroid Prime 4s, all these things. You're going to buy them. And that's why I forget what, and I could be wrong on these numbers. I want to say the average Switch has a 7-to-1 attach rate to it. Whereas they say The PlayStation and the Xbox fluctuates between 2 to 3.
Yeah.
That tells you right
sense.
there.
Yeah.
That tells you right there. That's what it's about. They're able to get people that when they buy that Switch, they're buying multiple games to go with it. And they're buying them, consistently year over year. Just in my home alone, there's 5 people in my home. There's 4 Switches in my home. That's just how it works. You know what I mean? Because we play Nintendo games and we love Nintendo games. And that seems to be the model that's obviously working for Nintendo. And do I think PlayStation and Xbox are going to 100% adopt that and start making lesser hardware? No, they're going to make cutting edge hardware. I mean, Sarah Bond even said Xbox, wants to do the biggest technical leap or something like that going into the next generation. So I do think they're going to do that. But I think the games themselves, the budgets attached to these games, I think you're going to see them scaled back. For sure.
Yeah. And that goes into what I also want you mentioned about like the short term and the long term. I think you're right. I think the short term, we're definitely going to still see these growing pains of the industry, and senior level people are going to be leaving the industry. And it's a shame because like they are extremely talented at what they do. And if more senior level people leave, then that means that like the junior levels are have to either step up, or they don't have the experience to be able to kind of to handle a production cycle, especially on a AAA level like that. So it's going to be even tougher. I think you're right. Like the industry always kind of like has a couple years shift like that to what it currently is at. Like I think we're now seeing the sort of the big impacts of the pandemic now as compared to what it was, in 2020 or 2020. Yeah. And I think that the short term effects of what we're seeing within the layoffs and everything that's happening in 2023 and 2024, we're not going to see the true impact of until probably 26 or 27. And then, but on the long term, going even further, like as you said, I think going into the next console generation, I think that generation will probably be what the hope was with this current generation, but it was delayed because we had a global pandemic that affected this current generation. So we're going to see like these probably maybe not necessarily as many AAAs, but on at least on the caliber level of, we're going to see maybe like a few more smaller projects from like Sony Santa Monica or Rare or 343 or whatever, like the studios that are known for their AAA games, like Rockstar too. I think we're going to see maybe a little bit of a scale back or focus in on one or two things that they know that can be able to is less risk. And then we're going to maybe see in the indie space, those folks that have left the industry or left the teams have been laid off. They're going to start up their own startups and indie studios, and hopefully they're able to get money and be able to create these games like a Helldivers, and we'll see, or a Pow World, and we're going to see more of those pop off within the gaming space. And we're gonna, like, I think we're gonna look back at what we thought 2023 was sort of the best year in gaming. I think we're probably gonna have maybe like 2 more of those years coming up, not this year, but maybe like a 26, 27, and being like, oh yeah, no, these years blow 2023 out of the water as far as in terms of quality games. So
completely agree.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Parris, thank you so much for the conversation, and I really do appreciate it. And I love that, like, I this podcast is kind of like where I'm very like even toned, and I'm like, I really wanted to be able to lay into WB, and I did that yesterday on another podcast. So I'm you got 2 emotional versions of Steve, but I love that. I love with you is that you're very, even though when things are like are very shitty, like on social media, you're always the voice of reason in a lot of the conversation. So I really do appreciate you being here, and then just being a part of this industry, sir.
As always, I appreciate you having me on. I consider you a dear friend, and it's always great when we get a chance to talk. And don't pay attention to social media. It's chaos. But
oh no, I paid attention. I stopped paying attention a while ago. Yeah. But anyway, Parris, where can people be able to find you and everything that you do on the internet, as it were?
Sure. Well, speaking of social media, you can find me. It's Vicious696, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, like everything. Then I'm a part of Gamertag Radio, and I'm also part of Kind of Funny. So you can check me out on both of those platforms.
Perfect. Well, make sure everyone follow Parris, and thank you so much, sir. And I'll see you all next week.